As Neptune went into Scorpio, there was a sudden change in the popular music landscape. The new rock and roll sound, itself black slang for sex, swept classic pop off the charts. Crooners who had dominated the Libra Neptune phase were suddenly out of style. For older generations, rock and roll represented all the taboos dark sex sign Scorpio could dish out. With Uranus and self-expressive Leo square Neptune and sexually charged Scorpio, 1956 saw Elvis Presley perform provocatively on mainstream TV, creating a moral uproar. With his boyish good looks, Elvis was the perfect young white face to sell the radical new black sound. While many politicians and preachers labeled rock and roll a communist plot or simply evil.
Reasons on rock and roll music and why I preach against it, and I believe with all of my heart that it is a contributing factor to our juvenile delinquency of today. I 100% believe it. Why I believe that is because I know how it feels when you sing it. I know what it does to you. And I know the evil feeling that you feel when you sing it. I know the lost position that you get into in the beat. Well, if you talk to the average teenager of today and you ask them what it is about rock and roll music that they like, and the first thing they'll say is the beat, the beat, the beat.
By coincidence, record companies dramatically cut the price of records, suddenly becoming more affordable to their huge new teenage fan base. As sales exceeded all previous, the new music culture seductively weaved its Neptunian way into teenage bedrooms across the planet.
Rock and roll has got to go, and go it does. That's the best way I know to get rid of it.
It is obviously no good music.
As the war on rock music raged, in 1958 the city of Boston, Massachusetts officially banned rock and roll after a white woman chose to have a sexually provocative encounter on stage with the African-American performer Chuck Berry. Police immediately shut down the show, creating a rock and roll riot. The racial overtones of rock and roll could not be ignored. The cosmic oneness of Neptune in music was dissolving racial boundaries, and the establishment was still fully opposed. As Neptune went into Scorpio, Rosa Parks' refusal to give up her bus seat to white passengers reignited the civil rights movement. Psychologist Evelyn Hooker, born with Neptune opposite Mars, Uranus, and Mercury, published her groundbreaking research paper stating homosexuality is not an illness and requires no cure. Neptune in deeply transformative Scorpio is exposing the truth, the shame, and fear indoctrinated into society, leading to a social revolution of an unprecedented level. The 1967 referendum in Australia for equal rights to Aborigines and the landmark Civil Rights Act 1968 in the US, enacted only 7 days after Martin Luther King's assassination. As rock star and drug overdose became interconnected household words, death would become a dominant theme of the Neptune and Scorpio era. With revealing Neptune in Scorpio in 1958, Ladies' Home Journal ran an article, Cruelty in Maternity Wards, exposing the horrific birthing trauma created by the drugs used in twilight sleep. From partially recovered memory, a flood of women sent the magazine their own horror stories. This, in alliance with the Pluto-Uranus conjunction in earthy Virgo, would lead to the natural birthing movement. But twilight sleep wouldn't lose its favor with the medical industry until the late 1970s. So associated with this era, emotional scenes of screaming and crying girls at concerts reminds us of the deeply emotional nature of Scorpio and the pent-up release of emotion being expressed by Neptune. Against and possibly because of the more oppressive Freudian social conditioning of previous eras. The medical industry, political and corporate power are all influenced by Freudian psychology, but as Neptune opposed Freud's natal Taurus sun in 1963, after a series of high-profile suicides from celebrities undergoing psychoanalysis, a new anti-psychoanalysis movement was spreading. Herbert Marcuse, who was born with Neptune conjunct Pluto, criticized the Freudian model of strict social control to suppress irrational emotions, but instead believed in a new school of thought emerging from Neptune in Scorpio that the inner self did not need to be controlled and repressed, but should be encouraged to express itself. Much aligned with the philosophy of Wilhelm Reich, this view won the support of baby boomers, student movement, and the emerging counterculture. Another psychological guru of the counterculture was R.D. Laing. During Neptune in hidden Scorpio, he did groundbreaking research on depression, exposing the family unit far from being supportive was a war zone of psychological manipulation. He went on to create rebirthing workshops and had a major influence on the human potential movement. Through Neptune's stay in Scorpio, society's attitudes were transformed. A Scorpio-like crisis prevailed, like the near-death experience much of the world felt during the tense Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962, where polarized Cold War politics and the annihilating reality of nuclear war were thrust together in a military and political standoff. As the crisis deepened, Pope John XXIII, with Neptune in Scorpio exactly transiting his diplomatic Mercury-Venus conjunction, sent private and public messages to de-escalate the situation. In the short reign of Pope John XXIII, he called together the Second Vatican Council, focusing on the monetary theme of widespread impoverishment, which awoke the liberation theology movement, particularly in South America, creating grassroots Christian-based social organizations of non-violent resistance and economic reform. And happiness I've known proves that it's right, because you're mine, I walk the line. In an era of massive upheaval, highlighting Scorpio's polarity of monetary Taurus, new economic theories on expanding free market capitalism and widespread criticism of free market capitalism vied for political support. You give me cause for love that I can't hide. The post-war period enabled American companies to capitalize on damaged foreign infrastructure and cheap labor. Now in the Neptune-Scorpio period, multinational companies began dominating world business, literally opening the door to an international free trade economy. I keep a close watch on this heart of mine. I keep my eyes wide open all the time. With Pluto's continued path through the US's ninth house of foreign affairs, the manipulation of foreign politics through CIA-backed coups escalated. With Uranus also moving into this house in the early 60s, the USA tripled and then tripled again its military in Vietnam. enacted its near-catastrophic freakout with Cuba and the Berlin War crisis, and escalated its nuclear encircling of the European Eastern Bloc.
I keep the ends out for the tie that binds, because you're mine, I walk the line.
A year after the Cuban Missile Crisis, JFK's assassination in Texas is considered by some the biggest conspiracy of the 20th century, with no shortage of astrological analysis online. But Scorpio isn't just the death sign, it's the sex sign too, and documents only declassified in 2015 show a salacious president whose aides arranged a girlfriend system. The contraceptive pill being introduced is often credited for sparking the sexual revolution, but there was much more going on, including second-wave feminism encouraging women to see themselves as sexually active beings, and with the Neptune in Scorpio collective stamp for deep intimacy no matter how dark that gets. And of course there was the music. With the 60s came about the phenomenal conjunction of Uranus and Pluto in Virgo, sextile Neptune in Scorpio, transforming and challenging almost everything in society. Artists and the music at the time were reflecting the new experimentation with drugs, with LSD becoming the most influential. Replicating the effects of and enhancing the mind-altering death troop of hallucinogens gave birth to psychedelia. Neptune in sextile to inventive Uranus and obsessive Pluto, a wave of music technology like multi-track recordings gave artists unprecedented complexity in sound.
I know you deceived me, now here's a surprise. I know that you have, 'cause there's magic in my eyes. I can see for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles.
With an unprecedented youth population, 1/3 of the entire population, Neptune and Libra generation had people power. With the peace-loving Libra generation opposed to war during an era of unparalleled war coverage.
Choke on it too, you're gonna lose that smile because all the while I could see for miles and miles, I could see for miles and miles, I could see for miles and miles and...
The radical implication of Uranus conjunct Scorpio's all-powerful ruler, Pluto, in grassroots Virgo brought rioting across the planet. In 1967, spreading as far apart as France and Hong Kong. With over 100 US cities rioting in 1968, late August with a stellium of planets in Virgo, sextile Neptune in Scorpio, overwhelming police brutality is caught live on TV for the Chicago Democratic Convention. Originally a youth movement, the anti-war movement had grown to include people from all walks of life. something was changing in the collective consciousness on the planet, and the three outer planets were responsible. With a Neptune Scorpio anger against the hypocrisy of the earlier decade and the fundamental lifestyle choices of the Virgo conjunction brought a whole wave of radical authority challenging groups and movements. At the same time, the protest era had a soundtrack, the crafty Virgo qualities of folk music, exemplifying Virgo's mercurial self-awareness with Scorpio Neptune's search for truth.
And they all come out the same. And the boys go into business and marry and raise a family.
While Nashville was keeping country music clean, the intensely dark Scorpio vibe manifest outlaw country, with Austin, Texas becoming the new Alterna hub.
When I was just a baby, my mama told me, son, always be a good boy, don't ever play with guns. But I shot a man in Reno just to watch him die.
Scorpio Neptune's fascination with secrets and mystical inner workings brought Eastern religion and the occult to Western consciousness. With Neptune in Libra generation having Pluto and self-oriented Leo, there was an emphasis on self-spirituality and the authority of the self. Combined with the powerful conjunction in earthy Virgo, new spiritual disciplines around sexual qigong and yogic traditions appeared. As well as the resurgence of pagan earth religions like Wicca, where yoga and the occult in previous decades have been predominantly available to the wealthy elite, its mainstreaming brought spiritual seekers from all economic backgrounds. Beatles' visit to Rishikesh, India in 1968 to study transcendental meditation with Guru Maharishi Mahayogi brought widespread media attention to Eastern mysticism. With meditative Neptune and transformative Scorpio, the Beatles, a cultural phenomenon in their own right, tapped into the collective hunger in the West for spiritual alternatives to the dominant Christian paradigm. Influenced by Wilhelm Reich, the Human Potential movement formed, with Esalen Institute becoming an icon of the era.
See if you can kind of have a conversation with this back. Tell it how you feel about it right now, how you're feeling right now.
With the mysterious Neptune in Scorpio, psychic research was developing on both sides of the Cold War. With at the peak of the mid-60s Uranus-Pluto conjunction, a Russian housewife with a natal Neptune conjunct Mercury opposite Jupiter named Nina Kalagina almost by accident becomes the center of the Soviet telekinesis research.
Then I saw her face. Now I'm a believer. Not a trace of doubt in my mind.
In the US, continuing from Joseph Rhine's work at Harvard University, Gertrude Smider created what she called the sheep-goat effect. This was also the time of the famous dream telepathy experiments in New York City.
And a lady, a goddess, came walking over the ocean.
The computer revolution is often compared with the famous Industrial Revolution in importance and scope. The Industrial Revolution effectively freed man from being a beast of burden.
With technological Uranus conjunct Pluto, sextile Neptune, the mid to late 60s was a computer revolution. Laying down the foundation for today's internet, it would manifest during Uranus' spectacular conjunction with Neptune in the early 1990s. With Neptune in deep water Scorpio came the first international surfing competition in 1964, with surf music becoming instantly popular, although somewhat ignored when swinging London came to prominence. With Neptune sextile to Pluto-Uranus conjunction in earthy and self-sufficient Virgo, the back to the land movement blossomed, with self-sufficient communes spreading across the globe, especially in California.
Then you know you're talking to that reefer man. Reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? Reefer man. Oh, that funny, funny, funny reefer man. Reefer man. Lucy in the sky with diamonds. Lucy in the sky with diamonds.
So I just lay back and laugh at the sun, 'cause I'm in shoo shoo shoo, shoo shoo shoo. Shoo, 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 Sugar Town.
Neptune in Scorpio brought the plutonic drug heroin into the spotlight. First created by Bayer Labs during the Neptune-Pluto conjunction of the 1890s, it manifested death cult glamour during the Neptune-Scorpio years. Intravenous use in both amphetamines and heroin dramatically increased, accounting for the phenomenal number of drug overdoses. All the while funding Vietnam War's Golden Triangle. Rock and roll had now become synonymous for drugs.
If you haven't heard of LSD, you will. An effective dose is incredibly small. These cubes contain only 150 micrograms. Why are you taking it?
To get high.
What do you mean by that?
Expanded consciousness, more awareness.
How does it compare with getting high on alcohol?
I've never been high on alcohol.
Neptune in Scorpio's obsession with the transformational effect of psychedelic drugs created psychedelic churches, ashrams, and communities, with psychedelic gurus appearing like Terence McKenna, Alan Watts, Allen Ginsberg, and the man President Nixon called the most dangerous man in America, Timothy Leary, whom while Neptune was conjunct his natal Mercury Venus in Scorpio, made famous the slogan, "Turn on, tune in, and drop out."
Turn on, tune in, and drop out.
With LSD becoming illegal in October 1966, the Saturn opposition to Uranus-Pluto helped manifest the San Francisco Human Be-In, a gathering of the tribes. The gathering of Baby Boom and Neptune in love sign Libra flower children put the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco on the counterculture map in a prelude to the Summer of Love. Meanwhile, in swinging London, as it was called, a musical and cultural revolution exploded via exploiting a Neptunian loophole in UK's restrictive liquor laws to create a youth-oriented phenomenon of late-night music clubs. The mid-60s was in fact the UK's creative Neptune return. With a fresh new sound, Neptune in deep-water Scorpio created underground radio known as pirate radio, broadcast from boats and offshore locations, playing the new music of the day, challenging the BBC's radio monopoly. As new fashion exploded in London, two young models became inseparably associated with swinging London. Jean Shrimpton rose to prominence in the mid-60s as Neptune transited her natal Scorpio ascendant. Twiggy became a fashion icon for swinging London, having what was called at the time a new kind of streamlined androgynous sex appeal. Huge fashion houses were no longer setting the trends. The baby boomers with Pluto and Leo wanted individualized looks, and erotically charged miniskirts and hot shorts became immensely popular, as did the previously banned bikini. Neptune and Scorpio's rise of the civil rights movement synchronized with Motown and R&B artists gaining mainstream popularity. Transiting Neptune conjunct Diana Ross's natal Scorpio ascendant, the Supremes rose to fame. Neptune's sextile a loving Venus, a powerful Pluto, and technological Uranus all conjunct in 1967, the Beatles, surrounded by the cream of the UK pop scene, performed for the first ever global TV link, watched by over 400 million people in 25 countries. While the radical young generation were baby boomers with Neptune in Libra, many of the musicians and artists popular with this generation were born with Neptune in cynical Virgo. As Pluto crossed their natal Neptunes in the 1960s, some transformed into generational voices.
When human respect is disintegrating, this whole crazy world is just too frustrating. And you tell me over and over and over again, my friend, you don't believe we're on the eve of destruction.
They continued to redefine personal and collective identity.
Say it louder! Say it louder! Say it louder!
And then all we have to do is cut the notes the right length. We can join them together on a loop and listen to them. And then with the higher notes of the rhythm, again we join them together on a loop and play it in synchronization with the first date. And over this we can play the sound of the plucked string, which can be either in the form of a loop like this.
This same generation had the electric transit of Uranus along with Pluto crossing their Virgo Neptunes in the 1960s, inspiring a technological explosion in the musical potential of electronica. Even the Beatles played an experimental electronic set under the pseudonym Carnival of Light. The highly Neptunian Beatles producer George Martin helped the band understand the huge potential of the studio as a musical instrument. Their experimentation during the phenomenal 60s Uranus-Pluto conjunction profoundly changed the musical landscape. With Revolver, Magical Mystery Tour, The White Album, and Sgt. Pepper's being recorded at this time. In the midst of Pluto conjunct Uranus sextile Neptune, art went multimedia and radically dissonant. Late in 1966, with the technological Uranus-Pluto conjunction in full swing, the Beach Boys record their first million-selling record, Good Vibrations. The complex and multi-studio session recording is unprecedented, with an estimated production cost of over $500,000 by today's standards. With its phenomenal success, it was a watershed moment for both using the recording studio as an instrument in itself and for record companies spending big money on hit records, which would go through the roof in the following era. With film, as Neptune entered Scorpio, the rebel was the new flavor. Neptune in Scorpio made the theme of outcast, dark and dangerous popular.
Lolita?
Lolita!
As foreign films gained in the American market with risque themes and language, Hollywood's Hays Code censorship was challenged and eventually abandoned entirely. By the mid-60s Uranus-Pluto conjunction, films for the counterculture captured mainstream appeal.
Astronavigatrix Earth Girl, whose specialty is...
love.
Shall I tell you what I would like?
I think I know.
Graphic drug use, sexuality, and new experimental editing techniques helped low-budget surprise hit films like Easy Rider to become part of a lucrative new phase for Hollywood, which would bloom in the following era.
I never really thought of myself as a freak, you know? But I love to freak.
No, man. This is grass.
You mean marijuana?
It flashed on a screen too quick to see, but still you get it subliminally.
Why are we all having strange dreams?
With deceptive Neptune and undercover Scorpio, spy comedies and thrillers became all the rage.
Can I do something for you, Mr. Bond?
Just a drink. A martini, shaken, not stirred. Won't you join me?
Not on duty. I'm Mr. Goldfinger's personal pilot.
Magical Neptune in hidden and mysterious Scorpio also perfectly suited the resurgence of magic and witchcraft and the supernatural, both in practice and in TV and film.
No! Look at his hands and his feet. Oh, God!
God is dead! Satan lives!
Pluto and its radical accomplice Uranus conjunct the US's natal Neptune in Virgo through 1967 and 1968 cannot be underestimated for its effect of radical change.
And so, as the war hawks escalate the war in Vietnam, we must escalate our protest against the war.
that stands before me.
I pledge to you, we shall have an honorable end to the war in Vietnam.
With Pluto and Jupiter conjunct the deceptive natal Neptune of the US in 1968, it had also been transversing over Richard Nixon's natal Virgo ascendant. Knowing which way the wind was blowing, he won the 1968 presidential election with a platform of ending the Vietnam War. But behind the scenes, he escalated the war, wanting an outright victory, stating he wasn't going to be remembered as the president that lost the war.
He's a Catholic, a Hindu, an atheist, a Jain, a Buddhist and a Baptist and a Jew. And he knows he shouldn't kill.
Due to his own undoing natal sun opposite Neptune, his fall would come through the Neptunian deceit of the Watergate scandal in the following era, making him the most disgraced president in American history.
He's fighting for the USA.
This ominous conjunction of the US Neptune and environmentally aware Virgo had the American Petroleum Institute, API, in 1968 discussed the risk of global warming from fossil fuel use.
He says it's for the peace of all. He's the one who must decide who's to live and who's to die.
But in a moment of unrelenting plutonic corporate deception, chose to stay silent over the risk of climate change awareness affecting profits.
Without him, Caesar would have stood alone. He's the one who gives his body as a weapon of the war.
July 20, 1969, with Neptune trine Mercury conjunct the Sun and technological Uranus conjunct expansive Jupiter and yes, the Moon, an estimated 50 million people watched the first landing on the Moon in a propaganda heist for the US.
One giant leap for mankind.
Ground control to Major Tom. 7, 6. Commencing countdown, engines on. 3, 2.
The Neptune in Scorpio era was considered a modern renaissance for tattoos. For most of the 20th century, the ultra-plutonic tattoo remained relegated to military servicemen and the lower working classes. But during Neptune and Pluto's sign, a technological, artistic and social transformation brought tattoos to the emerging counterculture. With 1960s celebrity tattoo artist Lyle Tuttle claiming women's liberation changed tattooing forever, making tattooing a softer and kinder art form, and leading to today's tattoo culture, where in the West, tattooed women now outnumber men. Art during this era reflected the huge social shifts of the radical Uranus-Pluto conjunction. Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein explored the explosion of modern consumerism with pop art. And the anti-commercial, anti-art sensibilities of the Fluxus movement merged music, light and multimedia to intentionally redefine the concept of art. Literature of the era focused on the tension, horror and conflicts of contemporary life, race relations and sexuality. Allen Ginsberg's Howl faced an obscenity trial in 1957. Books banned during the Neptune and Virgo era for obscenity like Lady Chatterley's Lover and Tropic of Cancer won legal battles in the US and UK, easing censorship laws. Betty Friedan helped start second-wave feminism with her study of unhappy housewives. And Rachel Carson's unprecedented attack on DDT and Silent Spring ignited the environmental movement. And so perfectly suited to Neptune and death sign of Scorpio, Sun conjunct Pluto native Elizabeth Kubler-Ross' groundbreaking book on death and dying was published in 1969.
But if you don't, let me be your eyes, a hand to your darkness, so you won't
Symbolic of Neptune and Scorpio era's Uranus-Pluto conjunction, Black writers like Frantz Fanon influenced revolutionaries with his attack on colonialism.
show that you are blind. Please put down your hands, 'cause I see you.
Beat writers like William Burroughs' radical and provocative style was popularized by the counterculture, with The Naked Lunch originally banned in several countries. The coming-of-age, cult-loving Neptune Scorpio Gen Xers would rediscover his work and popularize it during the Neptune and Capricorn period. After Neptune and Pluto first went into sextile in the 1940s, subcultures and individualism exploded. The search for identity during the Neptune-Scorpio era brought the hippie flower children, the symbolic cliché of peace-loving Neptunian Libra generation. The cool Uranian mods, short for modernists, and their cultural adversaries, the rough and ready rockers. And maybe not surprising when considering that warlike Mars is Scorpio's traditional ruler, the emergence of the subculture of skinheads. Originally lovers of ska music, it would devolve into a racist cult during the skinhead revival and subsequent decline during the Neptune and Capricorn era.
What brings you to Los Angeles? I wanted to see the Sharon Tate murder trial.
Even with Woodstock's 3 days of peace and music, the deathly Scorpio theme continued, with high-profile counterculture murder cases and the Altamont free concert killing bringing a collective disillusionment and abruptly ending the counterculture's fascination with biker gangs.
I don't like you. That guy's got a gun out there and he's shooting at me. Hey people! Hey people! Come on, let's be cool. People!
Although the origins of the AIDS epidemic is believed to go back to the late 19th century Neptune-Pluto conjunction, the Neptune-Scorpio era provided us with the first blood samples of HIV-infected blood, and the Neptune-Scorpio generation born at this time's fate will be to come of age as the epidemic explodes and is first recognized. May 4, 1970, with Neptune at the ominous last degree of Scorpio, the US National Guard shoots and kills students protesting US invasion of Cambodia. The Kent State shooting brought a deadly ending to the Neptune and Scorpio era as the American collective consciousness under a spell of nationalism turned their backs on the students' right to protest.
Do you think the Guard was justified?
Yes, I do. I'm sorry they didn't kill more.
Really?
Yes, because they were warned and they knew what was happening and they should have moved out. If that's what it took to break them up, well then that's what it takes.
That some of these things at the universities are not becoming dissent anymore, they're becoming mob action. And this is very dangerous.
With Nixon's pro-military support in an all-time high, it would take a moment of Neptunian espionage in the following era to finally end support for the war.